as if the house were alive and urging him on, telling him to finish what he'd begun. He knew the playhouse didn't have to be demolished. It could have been disassembled, sold, passed on to someone with little children who'd play endless games of pirates and cowboys in it. But his rage needed an outlet, and the playhouse had been there, mocking him day after day, a constant reminder of what he'd lost and would never have again. Edmund returned to his house on unsteady legs. A swell of relief welled within him as he glanced back at what remained of the playhouse. He felt closer to the end, able to see the finish line, and he could just about bear looking at his own home. Ahead of him stood a 12-foot-tall clear glass cube. Attached to the back of the house, a glass extension was framed in black iron, punctuating the garden's Victorian heritage like a slap. With its glass ceilings and walls, the cube stood futuristic in its contrast with the 120-year-old house. A low light inside it glowed, showing off contemporary garden furniture, an armchair and 2 sofas in grey, standing on hexagonal tiling in black and white that hid underfloor heating. A table spoke of drinks and early breakfasts, afternoon barbecues, and promises of autumn evenings spent with soft music and books. Its apparent perfection riled him, and Edmund imagined taking a hammer to the glass extension, knowing he couldn't. He wanted desperately to leave this house, sell it, or, preferably, strike it out of existence, erase all traces of the life he'd led here. He wanted to leapfrog past the agents, the potential buyers, the questions and forms to be filled, and to escape. To where? He didn't know. Finished? Ovidia asked Edmund as he entered the extension, the sledgehammer abandoned in the garden. She stood lacing a pair of running shoes. It was early, even for her. Her eyes were swollen from recent tears and a night spent between crying and tossing and turning in bed. Her worn blue t-shirt and shorts had been washed repeatedly, until their colours faded and seams frayed. Her hair was bound in a cheap headscarf, and her feet in a pair of lurid purple slippers. Edmund grunted in response, looking at his ruined nightclothes in the light. He examined his hands and saw that one was bleeding, a cut that immediately began to sting. He rubbed his hands on his shirt, leaving red-brown streaks of blood. "We could have sold it," Ovidia said, missing an eyelet. "We agreed, remember?" "A month ago," Edmund replied. "We've been endlessly putting it off like everything else." "We could have waited a little bit longer," she insisted louder, and tossed the shoe onto the floor, her task abandoned. "What for? A few £100? He asked in a quiet, weary voice. Ovidia picked up her shoe from where it had landed and, sitting down on the closest chair, began to cry. Again. She leaned over, covering her face with her hands and an unlaced shoe. Edmund felt as if it was for the 1,000th time that week. He could never have imagined that one day he would run out of empathy, that he'd be unable to reach out to her and comfort her. He was exhausted by her helplessness, her paralysis, her inability to function. It would soon be over. Edmund steadied himself with the idea that today would close this chapter of his life. He'd finally be able to escape the house and everything in it, even Ovidia. "Are you going running? Today?" he asked, realizing afterwards that it sounded like an accusation. Ovidia clutched the shoe, her eyes pressed tightly shut. "It won't change anything if you don't," he said, and she loosened her grip on the shoe. Guilt gnawing at him, Edmund watched her cry and finally moved to sit beside her, wrapping her in his arms. He contemplated the contrast between her skin and his, something he'd done only in the earliest days of their relationship. He watched the blood seep from his hand into the fabric of her shirt. His thoughts vacillated between knowing the shirt would be thrown away and contemplating how he would survive leaving her.